Greetings and welcome to Beneath the Soil. Hi, I'm Simcha Weinstein, Director of Marketing here at Alberts Organics. Today's topic, margin or markup. Which do we use to create an effective pricing strategy? My answer, unequivocally, is margin. Quite frankly, the only reason that markup is even in the conversation is because of how frequently it's confused with margin. As an example, if you were wanting to price an item at a 40% margin, and if you simply marked it up by 40%, assuming that you therefore will get a 40% margin, you will be very, very disappointed in your financial outcome. Confusing the two, confusing markup with margin, can cost your company thousands, tens of thousands, yes, even hundreds of thousands of dollars over the long haul. It's very, very, very important that we understand the difference between markup and margin. It's important that, one, we understand conceptually what margin is, and two, we understand how to accurately calculate margin. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive in and explore margin in much greater detail. As a concept, margin is relatively easy to understand. Margin is the difference between your cost of goods and your selling price expressed as a percentage. So, for example, if we bought a 40-pound box of apples and we paid $40 for it, we know that our baseline cost of goods is $1 per pound. And that's always the starting point for pricing, is finding our cost of goods. Now, if we were going to mark that product up by 50%, very simply what we would do is we'd multiply that, our cost of goods, by 1.5. That gives us 50%. If we were going to get 30%, we'd do it by 1.3, and so on. So if we mark that up by 50%, we come to a selling price that's $1.50 per pound. That's using markup, but that doesn't give us a 50% margin. Margin, if we looked at the margin in that example, we have 50%, 50 cents is the difference between the cost of goods and the selling price. That 50 cents is the margin. Now, if we look at that as a percentage of the selling price, which was $1.50, it's actually 1/3 of that selling price. Or expressed as a percentage, it's 33%. So even though we marked the product up at 50%, what we actualized as a margin was 33%. And this is important to realize. You will always mark a product up at a much higher number than what you'll realize as margin. And this is why confusing the two can be very, very detrimental to your bottom line. Margin is related to profitability. And that's very, very, very important. Now, in order to calculate margin, we're going to need to refresh our memories. We're going to need to go back in time a little bit, probably to around the time of the 6th or 7th grade, and recall a term that we probably learned at some point in mathematics, and that term is reciprocal. Reciprocal has to do with decimals. And the way it works is, whenever you have a decimal, let's say we have 0.3, the reciprocal of 0.3 is the other decimal or the other fraction that we add to it that gives us the number 1. So the reciprocal of 0.3, for example, would be 0.7, because when you add those two numbers together, you get the whole number 1. The reciprocal of 0.4 would be 0.6, and so on and so on. Now, reciprocal is very, very important as we move into the calculations of margins. And here's why. The formula that we use to calculate margin is you take your cost of goods. Now, if we stay with our example of apples, we know that our cost of goods is $1 a pound. And with that $1 a pound, if we want to sell these apples and achieve, let's say, a 35% margin. Now, if we want to achieve our 35% margin, we know that we typically have to price it higher than that to account for shrink and loss. So let's say we price at 40% margin. So with our apples that cost us $1 a pound, if we want to achieve a 40% margin, using the formula of margin, what we do is we take the cost of goods price, which is $1, and we divide that by the reciprocal of the margin that we're looking to achieve. So in this case, the margin that we're looking to achieve is 40%, or expressed as a decimal is 0.4. So in our calculations, what we are going to do is to take that $1, and divide it by the reciprocal of 0.4, which is 0.6. And when we do that, the price that we come up with is $1.66 per pound as our selling price. But now most of us in the retail world, we're going to bump that up a little bit and sell it at $1.69 a pound. And at that price, we have hit our 40% margin. Now, if we jump back to the notion of markup, if we decided, well, we would like to hit a 40% margin, and so what we're going to do is simply mark the product up by 40%, then what we come up with is a selling price of $1.40. Almost 30 cents difference between using markup and using margin. So now it's easy to see how when you confuse these two methods, the outcome can be very, very detrimental to your bottom line. 30 cents per box. Now, if you do a little extrapolation, if you multiply that by your 40-pound box, you've got $12 a box of lost income because you priced using markup instead of margin. If we extrapolate that a little bit further, and let's say you sell 30 boxes a week, so that's $360 less in margin dollars. Carry that out over a year, and it comes to a little over $18,000, nearly $20,000 in lost margin income. And that's just for one category, your apples. You've got citrus, you've got onions, you've got potatoes, you've got all the rest of your product. It's easy to see where this can come to a loss of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So again, it's critical that we understand the difference between margin and markup, and that we always, always, always use the calculation of margin to figure our price. So thanks for taking the time to watch this video, and thanks for enduring a little bit of a math lesson there. I hope this was helpful, and I hope it keeps you on track with margin instead of markup. So until next time, good luck with your margins, good luck with your pricing, and be well.